I, as an Asian American, will continue to support Black people in their fight for reparations.
I'm here today to fully support Black reparations because this is the bare ass minimum. Period. The bare ass minimum. History is enough of a reason. The dehumanization that we've seen is enough of a reason for why we need redress and reparations now. This is not an impossible reality, right? We've seen this with the Japanese Americans in the late 1980s. They received on a federal level reparations. And the fact that Black folks and our Black community and our brothers and sisters are still waiting for a formal apology, I'm just going to leave that there just to simmer. And I just really want to note, especially as an Asian American woman, I would not be here if it were not for the Black liberation struggle, the Black freedom fighters, culture creators, and the world builders that have fought for my liberation.
You just heard that. An Asian American woman is standing up and saying clearly, I would not be here if it were not for the Black liberation struggle. That right there is what real solidarity looks like. And that is exactly what we need to be talking about today. While some communities are organizing against Black Americans getting their reparations, here we have Asian Americans who understand the history, who understand the debt, and who are willing to stand on the right side of it. So we're gonna keep watching more of these clips, but if you're enjoying the video, remember to click on that like button, and remember that the video is for educational purpose. Stay tuned.
Please explain what's so funny about the United States' 160-year-old broken promise to the enslaved people who generated 40% of the nation's economic growth for free, and to their descendants who survived the better part of 100 years of Jim Crow and continue to experience systemic and institutional racism. Because I don't find it funny, I find it tragic. However, what is funny is that the first video under your profile is you duetting a Black man talking about how taxation and the threat of imprisonment for filing taxes incorrectly is akin to slavery. What's funny is you agreeing with that video as though you identify with his struggle, because you don't get to identify with any part of his struggle until you stop finding reparations funny. Reparations for Black Americans. Now you're facing pushback because you attempted to hijack that conversation by saying, what about Asian Americans? And as a white person outside the United States, you feel that your opinion, which you've repeatedly demonstrated is based on ignorance and misinformation, is entitled to the same consideration as my lived experience as a third-generation Asian American. So now you are inserting what you want Asian Americans to do in the place of actual Asian Americans to reverse victim and offender. The only times that speaking up for Asian American rights gets framed as being anti-Black is when Asian Americans are intentionally being weaponized to cause harm to Black people, such as in attacking race-conscious admissions policies in education and scapegoating Black people for the increase in anti-Asian violence, because that is how racial triangulation of Asian Americans by white supremacy against Black people works.
Should Americans pay for reparations?
Why is it just for Black people?
I think it's to right the wrongs of previous injustices such as slavery.
Is it a trial or a study?
No, I think it's just a bill that's being proposed.
Oh, okay. There's other things in the world and in San Francisco that need to be addressed.
Do you think reparations would de-incentivize personal responsibility and hard work, or would it have positive effects?
I don't think it would have positive effects.
If you consider duration and magnitude of harm done, I personally feel that Black Americans and Native Americans have every right to occupy the front of the line for as long as it takes to receive remedies and redress for historical and ongoing harms, and to tell other people to get in the back of the line. But historically, that is not what has happened. Again, Frederick Douglass spoke out against the Chinese Exclusion Act. Black Americans supported Japanese Americans in their fight for reparations. And the last thing I'm going to do is prioritize what you want Asian Americans to do, because people like you would prefer that marginalized people remain separated in their groups, fighting over scraps in the alley, rather than working together in the kitchen.
The reason why I think it's natural for Japanese Americans to support reparations for Black people is because Japanese Americans were the only ones to receive reparations from the US government ever for internment in World War II, and it came in the form of a $20,000 check. My grandparents were pretty old when those checks came, and they continued to be really paranoid about money. They kept gold coins in a giant safe in my uncle's old room. This government has such a legitimacy crisis, you'd think that they would want to try any way to regain some of that.
On August 10, 1988, President Ronald Reagan issued a formal apology and a symbolic payment of reparations to surviving Japanese Americans who were unjustly incarcerated during World War II. This was the first time the U.S. government publicly apologized for a mistake, stating that the mass incarceration was, quote, carried out without adequate security reasons, without any acts of espionage or sabotage, and were largely motivated by racial prejudice, wartime hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. By the time this act was signed in 1988, more than 40 years had passed since the forced expulsion, and many first-generation Issei had already passed away and did not receive this apology. It also failed to recognize the thousands of people of Japanese ancestry from Latin America who were forcibly removed from their homes, separated from their families, and extradited to the United States for incarceration during World War II.
Chinese pay reparations for slavery.
I think the question is really more so what can white people do rather than just reparations, because obviously I would say yes, but would that really benefit them? I think that's a conversation that needs to be had to then best respond to the issues that they're facing.
Reparations, without a doubt, are owed to Black Americans. If you don't support reparations for Black Americans, given American history, you are a racist. I'm not even going to get into why we're owed reparations, but I was looking around on TikTok and I see people asking, where are we going to get the money from? It's going to bankrupt so-and-so. There's so many of us, blah, 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 blah. First of all, it's not our problem where the money comes from. And it's not our problem that they waited 200 plus years to pay us the reparations. And now there's 50 million of us instead of 4 or 5 million. But let's get into it. It honestly just really sickens me that nobody asks where the money's coming from until it's about reparations. Everything else our government does, nobody seems to care about where they get the money for it from. If we got money to send to Ukraine, we got money to pay reparations. If we can afford to send this amount of money over there, we can afford to pay reparations. Oh, and guess what, U.S. government? You don't have to do it on your own. Make some of these colleges that directly profited off the slave trade help y'all out. Make some of these companies that got to where they're at today because of slavery, because of their participation in slavery, make them help y'all pay us. Make them pay. Make them pay. Make them pay. Native Americans got their reparations. Japanese Americans got their reparations. Even Germany paid the Jews after the Holocaust. So why not us? Why not the people who were put through the worst atrocity in history? Why are they still waiting on their reparations?
Lincoln wanted to give reparations to Southern white plantations owners for any slaves they lost. But in 1998, when blacks talk about reparations for free labor in slavery, they are virtually laughed to scorn. Why is that?
That's part of the hypocrisy in this country, because first thing, black folk have never made it an issue. They keep thinking that they won't get it. Black people, only group of people I know in this country who've labored and suffered and never got compensated for it. We've compensated American Indians now for almost 360 years with reparations. Whites got reparation, which they call freedom dues, and they came out of indentured servantship. Jews have gotten reparations. Jews have picked up over $52 billion since World War II. Japanese have gotten 3 or 4 reparations. They got $22,000 each starting in 1990 from the United States. They've also gotten reparations from 2 cities in California and the state of California, and Japanese Americans who moved to Latin America just came back into the country last year and picked up over $1 billion. The only people who've never gotten compensated is black folk. We even put money into Japan under what we call the Point 4 program, gave them $13 billion after we just got through bombing them. We also put another $14 billion into the Marshall Plan for Germans after we just finished bombing them. Black folk have never been compensated because black folk refused to make reparations an issue.
Talking about reparations.
Pay attention to something. When the Japanese Americans received reparations after intermittent camps, there wasn't endless debates on TV and talking about it for decades, y'all. Hear me well, y'all. I know y'all have heard me say this on videos, but hear me well. When Jewish survivors of the Holocaust received compensation, the checks didn't come after 200 years of we're still studying and talking about the issue. When the U.S. government compensated Native American tribes in settlements, they didn't hold town halls for generations and generations and talking about it and talking about it. They paid them folks. See the pattern? See, when the government is serious about paying someone, they don't spend 50 to 100 years discussing it over and over again. That's bullshit, y'all. Bullshit. I'm so sick of them using us. They pass a bill, they allocate money, the checks go out. But with Black Americans, it's always the same old rhetoric, same old tired ass bullshit, and they grab our ears in a headlock. Let's talk about it. They have committees. They study it. They have task force. Then it's more talks and talks and talks and talks. Meanwhile, this country drops hundreds of billions on wars and send billions in foreign aids and bail out corporations overnight. So see, the money clearly exists. The problem has never been money. The problem has always been political will. So stop getting excited about a funky ass politician when they start talking about reparations. Talk ain't never moved a goddamn thing. Talk is cheap. Pay attention to their actions. Because if they were serious, we wouldn't be still having this conversation, y'all, after 160 years after slavery ended. But at some point, Black folks, we got to ask them a real question. Because we are tired of being promised and being lied to and being talked to. Talk, 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 talk. That's all these bastards are doing, is talking. If they want to send a check out, goddamn it, send a check out. No more talks. I'm Dr. O, y'all, and I'm out.
Okay, the United States, Israel, and Argentina, as well as every single country that abstained for voting for reparations. Ghana led a vote in the United Nations for reparations for the descendants of chattel slavery, also calling it the greatest crime against humanity. And every single country that abstained from voting, that stuck their head in the sand, needs to be shamed just as much as the ones who voted no, because all of their racial politics are still extremely fucked up and they're trying to avoid accountability for what they did in the past that got them to be that way. Let's first look at the 3 countries that voted no, that the Black descendants of slavery are not owed reparations. So much of the US economy is still reliant on the exploitation of Black people, who make up a disproportionate amount of the prison population, which the law allows to work for free. The entire economy of the US, from hundreds of years before it became an independent country, was founded on slavery. The banks that are consistently able to deny loans to Black people and other people of color, well, these banks' wealth was extracted from their ancestors. And for anyone who's surprised by Argentina because it is a Latin country, I wasn't. Ethnically, they are majority European. They used to have plenty of Black folks, but let me just say that that's not the case anymore. There were policies that made that happen. And Argentina continues to try to claim the benefits of Latinidad while denying the racism in its past. And as for is not real, well, if they showed even a bit of favorable intent toward that resolution, then they'd have to admit that what they're doing to Palestinian people is, well, very similar to what the resolution was about. Now let's move on to the abstentions. All of Europe abstained. All of it. And that makes so much sense because they like to pretend that racism is not a problem. And if they just don't talk about it for long enough, everybody is going to forget that it was European countries who started the slave trade. The US didn't exist when the slave trade started in the 15 and 1600s. No. That was all you, Spain, Portugal, Britain. Y'all had the insane idea of kidnapping and trafficking people across an entire ocean because y'all unalived so many of the indigenous people of the Americas and you didn't want to do the work yourselves. That was crazy. Who would even come up with such an idea? It's nuts. And the British ambassador actually said, there is no need to compare atrocities. 15 million people were displaced from West Africa. 2 million died during the Middle Passage. And the hundreds of millions of their descendants who were born into slavery, segregation, and societies that don't value them as equals, well, that's hundreds of millions of people. If all you European countries can recognize that the Holocaust was a grave crime against humanity, because 11 million Jewish people, Roma people, LGBTQ people, and other minorities were unalive, you will have to admit that the hundreds of millions of people affected by the slave trade. I'm just saying, there's no need to compare. Well, you got to at least admit that the scale is also insane. And then let's move on to the Asian countries, because I'm actually really freaking disappointed in some of you. Japan. This didn't surprise me. Japan doesn't surprise me because they do whatever the white people do. They learned their fascism from Hitler and Mussolini. When they were still a baby imperialist country, during the 1800s, they studied what the Europeans did. They did what the Europeans did, and that's how they conquered Manchuria, Korea. Japan also really likes to stick its head in the sand about things. China, Korea, the Philippines, Taiwan, actually most of Southeast Asia would like to have a word with you, Japan, because if you admit that what was done to African slaves was wrong, then you'll also have to admit that what you did to all of the countries I just listed was crazy. Also, Cambodia, what? I feel like you guys of all people would know better. And as for the people who said that China voting yes is not a good thing, like sure, China is trying to maintain a good relationship with most African countries. Sure, they might have their eyes on the mines. They might want a little bit of copper. But would you rather they have voted no? I'm not going to glaze China too much for this, but I am going to shame Japan and Cambodia because what the
Reparations is not charity. It's not a handout. It's not a gift. It is what was promised. It's what is owed. And it's something that is 160 years overdue to African Americans who built this country.
The state of California is now one step closer to making good on that promise to repair Black Californians harmed by the legacy of slavery and anti-Black policies in the century and a half since emancipation. The Legislative Black Caucus is announcing a package of more than a dozen reparations bills, the first step in making Black Californians whole.
I mean, I'm hoping that we'll all be successful. I'm realistic enough to know that there's going to be some setbacks.
State Senator Stephen Bradford of Southern California is one of the Legislative Black Caucus members behind the reparations package. Bradford is one of two legislative leaders who served on California's first-in-the-nation reparations task force. Assemblymember Reginald Jones Sawyer is the other.
We have this momentous task of trying to get legislation and budget recommendations done. We're looking at probably a 5-year strategy on how to do this.
The bills come from the more than 100 recommendations released by the task force last summer at the conclusion of 2 years of work. The package includes in part bills to expand access to career education and financial aid in redline communities, prison reform, improved access to healthy foods, and a formal apology from the state.
In the Assembly chamber, in the Senate respectively, do you think that there is the will there, enough votes to make this happen?
I think we got work to do. I'll be real honest with you. We have to do a lot of work with our members and our colleagues to get them there.
I want to talk about the economic calculus of it all. Obviously, as California faces a significant deficit right now, how do you make the case to your colleagues to say that we need to put some money aside?
It's going to be a tough year because of the budget, but I've been here at the toughest times, and we found ways to fund those things that we said were a priority.
As for the Black Californians like Andrea Jordan, who can draw their lineage back to an enslaved African brought to America, they say reparations is long overdue.
My great-grandfather was a sharecropper who had 17 children and worked from sunup to sundown and died with absolutely nothing. They took his land and created laws to keep his land, and he died with a frown on his face.
What do you think he would say about you being here today, making sure your voice is heard, carrying on his legacy?
I would hope that he would be proud and know that I stand on his shoulders, and there are no better shoulders to stand on.
We have Asian Americans, people who have their own struggle, people who have the history of being discriminated against in their own country, and saying straight up, Black Americans deserve reparations. And I think that is powerful. Not because Black American brothers and sisters need anybody's validation or permission to claim what is already theirs, but because it shows you that people who actually knows their history, the people who have actually taken time to read and understand what happened in their country, they are not confused about this topic. They're not confused about reparation. And that is what gets me about people who are still out there opposing reparation. Because at this time, I don't even think that it is still about the history being true or not. Everybody knows that the history is real. Everybody knows what happened during slavery. The question is just whether America is willing to do something about it. The answer keeps being no or not yet, or let us form another committee so that it can talk about it more. And that right there is the most disrespectful part about this whole thing. Because when Japanese needs the reparation after being thrown into internment camps during the Second World War, and that was wrong. Nobody is disputing that. But when they needed reparations, America did not spend 160 years debating about it. They passed a bill, the world checks. When Europe needed to rebuild after the Second World War, America put together the Marshall Plan and sent billions of dollars overseas without blinking. When banks were failing in 2008, the government found hundreds of billions of dollars almost overnight, just bailed them out. But when black Americans, the people whose free labor literally built the foundation of the economy of America, when they ask to be compensated, suddenly nobody knows where the money is going to come from. Suddenly it is too complicated. Suddenly we need more studies, we need more task forces, we need more conversations. Come on, we all see what is happening there. And I really want people to understand what reparations are really about. Because I feel like so many people out there are debating about something that they have never looked into. Reparations are not about blaming random white people who are alive today about what their ancestors did. The conversation is about the fact that after slavery ended, black Americans were systemically, deliberately, through government policy, prevented from building wealth. The GI Bill that created American middle class, black veterans were largely shut out of it. That was not just some social attitude. There was an actual government-backed policy that told banks not to give loans to black families in these neighborhoods. And these neighborhoods are the ones struggling today. That is not coincidence. That is cause and effect. And when you have that level of documented, policy-driven harm, compensation is not a radical idea. It is just basic accountability. And you know what else I appreciated about those clips that we watched today? The point about how black Americans have consistently showed up for other communities. Frederick Douglass spoke against Chinese Exclusion Act. Black Americans supported Japanese Americans for their fight for the reparations. And so when I saw those Asian Americans coming out and say it out loud that they stand with black Americans on reparations, that was not surprising to me. Those are the people who know their history returning the favor. And that is what solidarity should look like. Now, I know somebody in the comments is going to say, where is the money going to come from? And I just want to address that now. Brothers and sisters, America finds money for everything. Wars, foreign aid, corporate bailouts, tax cuts for billionaires. The money is never the real problem. The problem is that there have never been enough political will to direct that money to black Americans. And part of that is that black Americans keep getting promised things around election period and then forgotten about after votes are counted. To this point, many black Americans are not even excited when they hear these politicians talking about giving them reparations, because talk is cheap. What matters is action. What matters is checks actually going out. And look, reparations conversations does not even have to be about checks, does not even have to be about direct payments. It can be about investment in black schools, black communities, black healthcare, black businesses. It can be about debt relief. It can be about making corporations and universities that benefited from slave labor actually contribute in paying off what they have gained from that labor. There are so many ways to do this. The only thing missing is the will to do it. Brothers and sisters, that was it. Let's hope that one day we will see black Americans getting paid their reparations. I want you to write down there in the comment section, I am proud to be a black American. If that is hard for you, just drop a black fist emoji. That was it for today. Let me know what you think about this video. And if you have enjoyed watching it, click on the like button. Those viewers who have not yet subscribed, you may support us by clicking on the subscribe button. Mr. TA, your African brother, signing off.